And just like every other time, we are back. My name's Charbel Milan. Today we got,
Victoria Barabas.
and this is a time shared. So, Victoria, just to get you up to speed, this is a time shared, the one and only podcast trying to bring light to people like you. People who've been doing it differently, had a more interesting path, and we're here today to share it with other people so that they can kind of think about how they can do how you've done and just kind of get out there, get creative, and make a way for themselves. So before we get going, if you just want to get people up to speed on who you are, what you do, and just some of the things they should know about you before we get going.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. I currently live in Los Angeles. I work as an actor and as a writer. Let's see. I moved from New York City. I had a history working in journalism, in magazines. I did some modeling for a bit, but really my passion was acting from a pretty young age. So, my my parents were not thrilled at the idea of me being an actor, so they tried to sway me away from it for a long time. But then eventually I just came back around and I was like, this is what I want to do, so this is what I'm going to pursue. And I've been lucky enough to have a pretty successful career insofar as I am doing what I want to do. I'm getting paid for it, and it's also led me to other avenues. Writing, producing within that field. So it's really opened up a lot of doors and exposed me to some other, aspects of that production. Yeah.
You said you currently live in LA. I know you're out here for other reasons, but you currently live in LA, right?
Yes.
So everybody knows LA for the Hollywood scene. They know it for being the heartbeat of music, or not music, but film production, right? Mm-hmm. Did you start off in LA when you started your career, or did you end up going to LA to benefit your career?
I started off in New York. I moved to New York to actually study theater because I thought the theater teachers were better. I don't think that's true, but I came from this old school idea of method actors, and they were all theater in New York City. Meryl Streep and
like Broadway?
Robert De Niro. Yeah, uh-huh. But they were all like, that's like, that was a long time ago. But it was kind of stuck in my head. And plus, my family, I have a lot of family from New York City, so it just seemed a little safer. Do you know what I mean? So I started in New York. I did a bit of modeling. Then was kind of turned off from that industry entirely. So I turned my attention to magazines and journalism, worked in that field for a couple of years. And then I was like, I really want to pursue acting. I haven't really given it a fair shot. So I started taking classes again. I got an agent. I started, doing small stuff, commercials, little bit parts in television. And then I actually applied to a couple of different grad school programs in theater and was accepted to ART at Harvard and ACT in San Francisco, and I chose ACT. So I moved to San Francisco. That led me to the West Coast, and then from there I moved to Los Angeles.
So do you have to do it that way? Because that's the thing, is I've heard a lot of people, they do it that way. They got to take classes, get an agent, they got to get accepted. So is that kind of like the traditional path, you could say, to get in the industry?
I would say that there is no traditional path to get into this industry at all. I mean, honestly, it is a crapshoot. The success is a crapshoot with how you get in. You can take acting classes. It would definitely help. But it is one of those things where I feel like, I think with any true artistic talent, it's got to just kind of live inside you. Do you know what I mean? So for me personally, there's a lot of technique that you can learn that's helpful. But I think the best way to go about it is really just like looking inside and believing in yourself and seeing if you can do it on your own. As far as getting an agent, yes, that's helpful. I mean, I didn't have an agent to begin with. A lot of people don't have an agent to begin with. It feels impossible to get an agent when you're just starting off. The industry is completely oversaturated. There's so many actors, so many people trying to be an actor, so many people trying to make it in that industry. So when you first send out your headshots, and you've got nothing on your reel, you've got nothing, no experience, it can be difficult to get an agent. It's easier if you are younger, and I mean like teens and early 20s. You might be lucky enough just with your look to secure an agent, but that was not the case with me. I got started like in my late 20s, so I ended up taking a lot of, casting director workshops and that sort of thing. And I was able to make connections that way, sort of showcase myself to those people in the industry. And then that led me to Bit Parts. And then from there, I was able to get an agent.
Okay, so before we dive really deep into your story, your experiences, and just kind of the specifics behind, your career, do you kind of think the industry has changed now that we have things like Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, all these different platforms that are having their own quote unquote originals, right?
Oh, yeah.
It used to be that Hollywood was the only way. If you weren't connected out in Hollywood, if you weren't moving West Coast like you did, it was almost like you didn't have a chance. But now California's been the one that's still locked down, and people are out here in Atlanta shooting and things are popping up. How do you think the industry has changed from when you started to now?
Yeah, the industry has changed. I mean, there is no doubt about it. I mean, with the streaming services and even with things like YouTube, I mean, there are platforms where people can create their own stuff and put it out there. Do you know what I mean? There are a lot of YouTube stars now that are successful in the acting genre and industry.
Right.
So yeah, it's and then with streaming services, I mean, I could get into it, but when it comes down to contracts and money, I mean, it's not the same game as it used to be. I mean, when I started, it was you would get a commercial or a role on a TV show that was a cable or a network, and depending on what the role was, depending what the spot was. But there would be something called residuals. With a lot of the streaming services now, with Netflix in particular, they don't really work that way. So it's not how many times something is seen. A residual is every time it airs, you get paid. With Netflix, they sort of do a buyout. So they buy the product. So, the film or the TV show or whatever. They make a deal with the producer. And then from what I understand, they pay quarterly. So it's not, they don't pay residuals in the same way that traditional networks and cable networks do. So that's changed. That's been a huge point of concern and questions with actors, with agents, with SAG, Screen Actors Guild.
I've heard about that.
Yeah, who represents actors, and it's a union that most actors are a part of. So things are definitely changing. And that's been in the last, we haven't even quite wrangled that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I talked to my agents about it. I talked to other people in the business, and it's still kind of a big question mark. But it's definitely changed the game. It's definitely changed the way things are moving, for sure.
So are they trying to, squeeze you out? Like, you would think it would be
It
more
feels
direct.
that way. Yeah. It's just the way that platform works. It worked on a streaming service. So because people can stream it, because they can, with Netflix, they sell a membership. Do you know what I mean? So they just don't, and they've always been that way. They refuse to release how many times something is being watched or seen. They just don't, and that's part of their brilliant business model. Because there is so much exposure, and because Netflix is so huge, a lot of productions are very happy to get on that network. And again, like with the bigger productions, they have different contracts with Netflix. So it just depends on the production and their personal contract with Netflix. But it has changed the game for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so I know you mentioned earlier that you started off modeling, but you didn't want to continue. You almost looked like you were disturbed by the industry. So without getting too deep into that, could we kind of know what happened there?
Yeah, without getting too deep, I just found it to be, kind of sleazy. My personal experiences were not, there was a lot of, I just didn't think it was very, clean, I guess I could say. They want you to, you got to be like stick thin. You feel you end up finding that your whole self-image, your whole self-worth is suddenly in someone else's hands. And it's based on your appearance, and that's it. And to be fair, you are the product. Do you know what I mean? So the client needs you to look a certain way. So that's my experience was, that your self-worth is sort of boiled down to that. And I didn't really like feeling that way. Do you know what I mean?
So it's almost like you can't get upset if you're objectified.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's kind of what this is.
That's the business. Yeah. Yeah. You can't take it
Okay.
personally. Yeah.
But you knew you still wanted to be in front of the camera. So then you were
Right.
like, okay, this isn't going to work. But, I know what I want to do. I just not in the right avenue.
Well, it was funny because I only got into modeling to as a segue into acting. When I got to New York and I started seeing agents and I started taking classes, everyone was like, well, have you modeled? You're tall. That might be an interesting way to sort of like wiggle your way into the industry. And I think it does work for a lot of young women and men. But for me, it just wasn't my cup of tea. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because it's almost like sometimes you want to force yourself to continue because you think that's supposed to be your path. Because at that time, hindsight's 2020. But at that time, you're just looking for any opportunity you can get. But I'm guessing you cut ties there. You moved to LA, and then when did things really start taking off? Like as far as getting in front of the camera, landing gigs. You said it was a couple of commercials and stuff?
Yeah, it started off with some commercials in New York City. And I mean, really television commercials are kind of one step up from modeling. So it was easy to get into that field just because it's based on your look for the most part. So I booked a couple of national network commercials. One of them was like a little mini-series commercial spot. It was like every they were like commercial episodes. So every commercial episode was a minute long and it aired, every week on TBS during some TV show. It was a Capital One commercial. So it kind of started with that. And then I started getting little bit parts in like White Collar and Rescue Me. And what else did I do in New York? I can't remember. Just little bit parts there. And then I applied to grad school. And then that took me out to San Francisco.
So was this before or after that whole writing strike thing that was going on?
That was after, or actually during, like 2007, 2008, yeah.
Did that affect you at all?
At the time, no.
No?
No, yeah, not really.
Okay, sweet. So you get into grad school and you're kind of starting to be like, okay, it's starting to work for me, right? Things are picking up. Do you have an agent by now?
Yes, I do, yeah.
So you have an agent, you're in the school, the gears are starting to turn. How are you feeling at that time? Like, what is it like when... Because it's kind of like you said. I mean, you go walk down the street, 8 out of every 10 people are like, I want to be an actor. I could be an actor. I want to be an actress. It's like everybody wants the camera on them, but at the same time, not everybody has it. Or at least not everybody has what people are looking for at that time. So when you're kind of in there and you're starting to see things working out in your favor, how does it feel?
Well, first of all, I'll say that things didn't happen for me overnight. I would be hesitant to say that they've happened for me right now at all. Do you know what I mean? Actually, I worked at a hotel in New York City, and there were a lot of celebrities that used to come through there. And I was talking to someone I was waiting on one night, and he said, what do you do? Do you do anything besides this? And I said, yes, I'm an actor. I'm trying to be an actor. And he said, that's interesting. I have, a few close friends that are very successful actors. And I'll tell you, it's the one industry where you never feel like it's enough. I mean, unless you're Julia Roberts, you're just always looking for the next level up. And I do think about that often because it does feel that way. So I can tell you there was never this aha moment like, I've made it. You know what I mean? Never. It was just a slow roll. It was just like a slow climb up the ladder. I'm still climbing that ladder. Grad school, I actually only went for 1 year and then I left. And those are for personal reasons, but basically, it was very expensive. I felt that after the first year, I'd sort of seen what the program was about. I had already taken a number of classes in New York City at schools that I thought were really fantastic and with teachers that taught me a lot, I felt. So after my first year, I graduated. And I saw the graduating class in Los Angeles kind of facing the same struggles as I was facing before I got into grad school. A lot of them didn't have an agent. They were still, beating their head against the wall. And I wasn't sure if, for a lot of people, grad school can offer connections. They can offer internships, do you know what I mean, in other industries. With theater school, that's not necessarily the case. It can, do you know what I mean? There are some programs that are better situated for getting you into the industry. Do you know what I mean? Like helping you make those connections, but some do not. And I feel like this is something with any MFA program. They teach you about your craft. You might make some connections along the way. But overall, I'm not sure if it's absolutely necessary. So I will say that. So I only went for 1 year, and then I left the program, and I just kind of, winged it after that.
Do you think that's the pitch? Like, that's what they want you to think, that you need to come to the school in order to get in, almost, but you kind of figured out, like, people are graduating, and I'm more up to speed going in than the people graduating. So it's really just a networking type of thing.
I would say that, MFA, and the only reason I keep referring it to as MFA, because I'm thinking about writing MFA, creative writing MFA programs as well, which I've also considered applying for and going into, and I've spoken to a lot of writers, authors who have gone that route, and they say kind of a similar thing to how I feel about the MFA program in theater. It's not, you can hone your craft. Do you know what I mean? It's a great opportunity to hone your craft and really practice and work at your craft. But will it absolutely help you be successful? No. And that's just, there's just no guarantee that it will. I think an MFA program, their pitch is, yes, you probably have raw talent. If you've been accepted into this program, you have raw talent, but we are here to help you develop that raw talent, and we are here to help you hone your craft. And that will make you a better actor, writer, artist, whatever.
I'm trying to imagine it, but it's the type of thing where from my understanding, you either have it or you don't, right? Like, what kind of things can they help you with? Like, is it just technical?
Yeah, a lot of techniques, mostly. I mean, once you start understanding, you're in a lot of ways, you're right. You either have it or you don't. And that, again, when you think about other artistic endeavors, you can say that about almost any artistic endeavor. Do you know what I mean? You can say that about cooking. You can say that about writing. Right. You can say that about interviewing. There's so many things where it's like, well, you either have it, either have a knack for it or you don't. Even if you are not as naturally talented as the next person over, technique can help you a lot. It can help you at least reach, the next level, or, you might not be a superstar, but it'll help you learn avenues and techniques that will just help you succeed in some way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like all right, like in this shot, you don't look at the camera or you like is it the type of thing where it's like, all right, like camera's on you don't blink 60 seconds, then you turn, or is it more of like breathing techniques, memorizing lines? Like what are we talking about when we say technical? Because to a person like me who's just kind of looking at the whole industry like third person, I'm just trying to think of what are some of the things, because like did they teach you like what's the word? Like how to use all the, not the props, but all the like, because don't they have stuff to make you cry? They got different like, I know there's different camera angles, different type of like I know every director has their own style.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So they obviously can't teach you that. So what kind of stuff are they teaching you as far as like how to better your act?
Well, that's a very good question. I would say that there are all sorts of different acting classes, first of all. There is, like scene study, where, you pull scenes from plays or from scripts and you work on the scene and you sort of work on, it could be depending on what the school, that's the other thing. There's all sorts of different techniques. Each school focuses in on a different technique for the most part. So, there's Stella Adler, there's Lee Strasberg, there's, oh my God, the one that I went to that I can't remember his name. Hang on, I'll get back to that. But that's based on Sandy Meisner. That's based on it's a very responsive sort of behavior. They teach you how to respond to the other person. That whole philosophy is that the other person is the most important person, not you. It takes all of your self-consciousness off yourself, and you just pay attention to the other person. And if you just pay attention to the other person, that will inform how you behave. And that's the idea behind that, is that's what we do in everyday life. Do you know what I mean? That's how human beings interact. Lee Strasberg is a different technique that focuses in on drawing from personal experiences, sense memory. Do you know what I mean? If you smell something, if you smell lotion on your hands that reminds you of, the lotion that your mother used or your grandmother used when you were a little girl, and something about that is a sad memory, that can make you cry. Stella Adler is more of an imagination-based technique where the idea is the opposite of Lee Strasberg. It's not sense memory. It's not pulling from your experiences. It's really wholly imagining yourself in that character's shoes, just out of a pure imagination, building a character based on that. So you have, and I could go on. There are all sorts of different techniques. The school that I went to in New York City believed in teaching their actors all of the techniques and allowing the actor to choose which one worked best for them, even if that meant a combination, which I found to be very helpful. So those are your basic, acting, theater type schools. Then you have like script workshops where they will teach you how to break down a script. You know what I mean? You get your audition, they're called sides is what you get. So it's like, 2 to 10 pages, usually not more than that for an audition. And you are able to look at the scene and figure out, beats, especially when it comes to comedy. Timing is everything. Do you know what I mean? So those would be techniques that they teach you in, a script or an audition class. And all of that is very helpful. I mean, if you learn those types of techniques, especially like breaking down a script and understanding beats and understanding, quite honestly, it feels almost mathematical. If you understand that, you're going to be leagues ahead the next person. Yet, I will say in the same breath, if you just inherently understand it, if you just inherently get it, if you inherently have this sort of comedic ear, or just an authentic ability to respond to the person who's standing in front of you without being consumed by what's going on in your own head or being so self-conscious, then you are also leagues above most people. So again, it's like, it goes back to, yes, if you have the raw talent, if you have it, you just have it. However, if you need some help, these classes will definitely help you.
Have you ever gotten like the script in your hand and you're kind of just scrolling through it and it's not what you thought it was going to be? Like both ways. Like let's go down the path of, you're disappointed, and then we'll go down the path of like, I can't wait to shoot that. Like, have you ever like received a script where you auditioned and you kind of understood the part, but then once you actually got the script, you're like, ugh, like.
Are you talking about reading the full script after I've already won the part, or are you talking about?
How does it work? See, I'm trying to imagine a position that I don't even understand. Look at me, what am I doing, right? So how does it work? Like you have to audition for the part, right? But then you get the details.
So the way it works is. I'll start with the production side of things. So production is looking to cast a movie or a TV series, right? So they're looking for X amount of characters. They send out what's called a breakdown that goes across all the platforms, all the agents, all the managers, they have access to it. And the breakdown tells you what kind of characters they're looking for. We're looking for a character named Samantha. She's between the ages of 18 and 25. She's blonde. She's quirky. She's funny. And then the agents submit their actors. The casting department chooses from those actors. And I can tell you, oh God, I once listened. There are thousands of submissions. And they choose, depending on how large the role is, they'll choose like to see 20, 30 actors out of thousands of submissions. Sometimes less than that, the casting director for Mad Men said that she sent out a breakdown for a co-star role. She received 8,000 submissions and they only saw 8 actors audition. That was it. And they choose out of those 8 actors. So they, so the way a casting director will make that decision is based on personal relationships, is based on, how big the agency is. If you have a stronger, more powerful agency, then they might choose those actors first. Again, it depends on relationships with the actors themselves, with the agents. And if they just are looking at the actor and they're like, you know what, I think this actor is right for the role, they'll call them in. So once you get as an actor, once you get the audition, your agent sends you the audition. They send you what's called the sides, and that's what you will actually be performing when you go to the audition. So it's like I said, about 2 to 10 pages, can be more, depending on how many scenes they want to see and that sort of thing. Sometimes, if you have a good agent, they will also send you the full script right away. My agent does everything in his power to send me the full script, whether it's a movie or a television series. If the casting department says, no, we're not sending out the script, he finds a way to get a handle of the script. And sometimes as an actor, you don't need the script. Do you know what I mean? Like if it's a bit part, if it's a guest star or co-star role, it's not really necessary for you to read the entire script for you to understand what your role is. I will say it's obviously very helpful. Reading an entire script will help you understand the entire story, what your part plays in that entire story, what the tone is, those sorts of things. But it's not always absolutely necessary. So you go in, you audition. These days it's more you put your auditions on tape, so you self-tape it. You send in your audition, and then maybe you'll get a call back. Maybe they just book you straight away based on your audition. It can go a million different ways. So that's how that works.
So when did you land your first lead, you could say, right?
My first lead
Like your
role,
first movie.
I
Big
actually,
screen.
yeah.
Lead role, main character, everything. Like we didn't make it yet, but all right, we got one. Like when did you go to sleep at night and say, all right, we're getting somewhere?
Well, it kind of happened. It's funny. I mean, the first lead role I got was the lead role in this Capital One commercial that shot for a week in Atlanta, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but at the time it was a huge deal. For me, it was a week-long shoot.
Yeah.
It was very different than most national network commercials. There was an entire story. There was an entire arc. And, it was between two characters. And that felt huge at that time. Do you know what I mean? My next big role that I got, I also wrote and produced a pilot and web series and, of course, starred in it. So that was my next opportunity to see something through entirely as a starring role. But I was cast as a lead in a movie in 2018, I think it shot. That was my first starring role in a feature film that aired on Netflix. So that was pretty exciting because it just felt, it just happened so spontaneously. And then after that, others followed. So, yeah.
See, the thing that I find really interesting, just from talking to people in all different types of industries, right, is everybody has like a way of doing it. Like there's a lot of people that can do the same thing, but they have their own way of doing it, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of actors, a lot of actresses, a lot of different roles, whatever it might be, but then there's you. So what were some of the things that you started to find yourself not only like being good at, but techniques that you were using? Like, cause I've heard some actors, they won't see their family for like 3 months or however long they're shooting, and they'll really get into the part. And then there's other people who like won't socialize, or there's people who just, they'll play a specific type of music while they're reading their, did you find that like at any point in time you started to have certain things that were unique to you and how you prepared?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that's just, I feel like what you're talking about is the actor's process. Or like, again, any artist, they have a process that they usually go through. And like you said, there's some actors that, it's quite amazing. They're just like talking like you and me. And then the PA comes over and they're like, okay, we're ready to shoot your scene. And they're just like, no, okay. And they go over and then they just, they get into the scene, the camera's on, and they just start bawling or doing, whatever. They just like fall into it just like that. That's amazing to me. It doesn't quite work as spontaneously for me. And as you said, there are other actors who just completely submerge themselves in their character and are the character. They're called method actors, that behave like the character when they are on set, when they're off set, they just submerge themselves. I definitely have my own processes that work for me. I do, when I first get a script, I read it at least, depending on how much time I have before we start shooting. That's the other thing. Sometimes I get a script and 2 days later we're shooting, and I have
Jeez.
2 days to prepare. And this is for a lead role.
And then at that point,
That's not the case with all, that's not the case with all films. But some of the films that I've done with Netflix or Lifetime, that's the timeline. So I tried to read it at least 2 or 3 times, just objectively. Do you know what I mean? Like, not really thinking of myself as the character, just for the story, just so I can kind of soak up what's actually going on. Trying to imagine what's going on from every character's point of view, just getting a good hold on the story. Then I start going through it and making notes from my character's point of view. After I'm done with that, I do spend some time trying to imagine what my character's background would have been like, certain specific relationships, spending a lot of time thinking about those relationships, what they mean to my character, and then finding myself in that character, finding where my personal experiences or moments that feel similar to that. I try to bridge that gap from my own life into the character's life. When I'm on set and we are filming, it's a magical experience, because you don't have time to think. You just don't have time. Everything moves so quickly. And once the cameras are on, hopefully for me, I've done enough homework leading up to that point, because once the cameras are on, it's on, and you just gotta like go with it. You just gotta like let it fly. You really have to let go. And at that point, it's the most fun. I mean, the homework leading up to it is, very arduous, and even auditions are, I think they're a pain in the ass. And I do not get a lot of joy from auditioning. But once I'm on set, I have an incredible time. I feel very connected to my characters. I have a great time on set with everyone I'm working with. It's just a magical experience with working with the directors, fellow actors, the entire crew. I mean, it's just a really magical experience. And it does feel like it just all comes together, just kind of like all comes together in the end.
Just like that flow state.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It feels like you just hit the flow. Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's money. Like, every shot is money, right? Like, if you're messing up your lines, they're kind of starting to look at each other. They're like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Has that happened before?
Oh, yeah. If you mess up a line? Yeah.
Not when you mess up a line, but where, like, you've been around a person who was casted and they're doing a horrible job. Do they ever get recasted? Like, what's the conversation like? Because I know that's weird.
I've never been in a production where they've I haven't been in a production where they've recast the character. I was on a TV show once where they hired a girl. She was supposed to move on as a potential recurring to series regular character on the show. After we shot the one episode where they introduced her character, they fired her. And it was because her attitude wasn't really gelling with the rest of the cast and crew. To put it more bluntly, they thought she was kind of acting like a diva. And so they fired her. She was on the one episode, and then they kind of introduced her character, and then that was it. But I haven't been on any film productions where they've had to recast. I've heard stories. I don't know if you knew, we were just watching Back to the Future. Michael J. Fox, it was Eric Stoltz that was originally cast in that production. And I think they started filming. I think they filmed for like a couple of weeks, and then they let him go because he just wasn't right for the role. He was just lacking a certain quality, and then they recast with Michael J. Fox. So it does happen. I've never been in a production where that's happened. And as far as working with an actor who you feel like they're not doing a good job, I've definitely had experiences where I'm kind of thrown by what the other actor is doing. But I'll say, again, everyone has their own process. Do you know what I mean? So if they're doing something that seems really strange to me, or if they're, I've worked with, A-list actors who just I shot something, I'm not going to drop any names, but I shot something opposite of an A-list actor, and he could not get through his lines. I mean, he had like this long monologue, and he just kept messing up. And, you just do take after take after take after take. And, with editing, they make it look good when the final product comes out. And he did. He looked fantastic when the final product came out. But it was being opposite him. It was interesting to see him flub so many lines, mess up so many times. I mean, it was fascinating to watch. You just have to remember that everyone has their own process, and it might look strange to you being on the other end of it, but it could look magical when it comes out on screen. So you just kind of have to go with it. And of course, find a way to connect to that person because you are working with them. So you just have to make it work,
So has being an actor, actress, taking on different roles, embodying different emotions, does it ever take a toll on you? Like, do you ever go at home at night and you're just kind of like having an identity crisis? You're like, who am I? Because you're trying to fit the role. You're trying to be authentic. You're trying to be 100% there. But at the same time, if you're not, like you said, being a method actor where you're living your life as this character.
Right.
What's it like on and off the set? Like, do you ever ask yourself, are you like, am I fake? Like, have you ever had people be like, oh, no, she's just acting? Or, like, does that affect you in your personal life? Because I know for a fact, like, I'm not going to drop any names, but I know I've had certain people tell me just, like, from certain things they've done that when they were kind of off the set. See, we were talking to one guy maybe like 20 episodes back. He started off in front of the camera, and then he became more of a producer, and then he ended up in front of the camera, and then went back to being a producer. Mm-hmm. And he said he kind of just started to have like a moment where he didn't really know where he fit in, and he didn't know where he wanted to be, like almost like an identity crisis. And it was just coming from taking on all these roles, all these different positions, putting so much on his plate, trying to succeed in the career. Because like you said, you never really feel successful.
Right.
But then you end up kind of just feeling empty. You don't feel like you've succeeded at anything.
That's an interesting
Got a little deep
question. Yeah, I mean that's an interesting personal experience. I think, well, to answer your first question, do I feel like I'm never myself, or do I feel like I'm getting caught up in my other characters? I don't. No, I don't. I don't think again, I find myself in that character. Do you know what I mean? I was playing last year, 2019, I was playing a role where I was playing a widow, and as the character, I was like, it kind of kept coming up. There were scenes, she just lost her husband, it was this very kind of, and at the time, my mother was going through a really hard time in the hospital. In fact, I almost had to leave the production because she was having such a hard time. We were 3 days into shooting a 2-week production. I was the lead, and my mom was having such a hard time in the hospital back home that I almost had to leave the production, which I didn't even know what. I called my agent, my manager. I was like, I might have to leave. I don't know and they said, we've never dealt with this before. Luckily, my mom ended up being fine enough for me to complete the production before I went to go see her. But I drew from all the sadness I was feeling with my mom's situation and placed that into, how this widow must be feeling about having lost her husband. So it, I like a little too much. I think, some of the wardrobe stylist was like, your character is really sad. I was like, well, she's a widow, I imagine she'd be sad. But yeah, since I draw, I try to bridge that gap from myself to my character. I don't ever feel like, I don't feel like schizo, like, personality disorder. I don't feel like
like not schizo, but do you feel like you take a piece of every character with you?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, sometimes with auditions where I'm really feel connected to the character, and I spend so much time preparing for the audition and really giving myself over to it, it can be hard to leave that audition behind once it's finished. And definitely, if I'm doing a movie or a TV series, and then once we wrap, there's definitely the days that follow are kind of sad and a little depressing, just because you feel like your character has kind of died in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's over.
It's over. Yeah.
It's done.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know that with people who paint, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing is, everything's art. This is art. Opening a box, it's a unique way it could be considered art. Nowadays, you never know. But with quote unquote art, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like painting, writing a book, like I know you are right now, which I want to get to. Do you almost feel like it's never complete? Like, do you ever go back and watch certain things that you've shot and you're like, I wish I could have done that a little better, or I wish I could go back and change this, or like the days following after you shoot, are you kind of thinking about it and you're like, well, I wish in that scene I would have had a little more? And does that ever haunt you?
Oh, yes. Yes. Yes, 100%. I mean, I've shot scenes and I've gone home that night when I was shooting Wing Woman, which is the web series and TV pilot that I wrote and produced. There was one day where I just felt like we just didn't get it, and I second guessed all of the choices that I made, and I couldn't sleep that night. I mean, I tossed and turned all night because we were on a tight shooting schedule. We were on a very low budget, and also it was it was completely mine. Do you know what I mean? It was my project, and I couldn't sleep. Funny enough, when it came out, that's like one of my favorite scenes. I mean, the truth was I was so free and so not thinking about anything that it turned out to be a fantastic result, but I didn't know that at the time. And then there are other, I think, there are some actors that say that they never watch anything that they've been in, or, they
That's
rarely
a
watch
lie.
them.
No way.
Yeah, some actors. I mean, Robert Redford was doing an interview once, and he said he was with his niece or something, and he watched a movie that he had done like 20 years ago, and he had never seen it before, and he was like, oh yeah, okay, we'll watch this movie.
Wow.
I definitely watch everything that I've been in because I want to see how my choices have come off on screen. I want to learn from, I remember what it's like making those choices, being in front of the camera, making the character choices up until that moment. And so I want to just see how it ended up. I just want to see how the whole thing turned out. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But I have noticed that, I usually just watch it once and then that's it. I mean, and I'm not really interested in watching it again after that. It's because for the same reason that, it's over. It's done. Do you know what I mean? Like the character's done. So...
See, that's crazy. I was about to say the exact same thing, is that with these interviews, I'll watch it one time while I'm editing it, and I'll be like, okay, I could have done that better, could have said that better, maybe I should have shut up a little more here. But then after that, you almost don't want to. There's like, you're like, I'm not a narcissist, like I'm not consumed with myself. Yeah,
and also like you're moving on to, if you're an artist, you want to move on to the next thing already. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like you don't want to, get sucked in.
Right. So I know COVID's been kind of, but before COVID, what was your most like recent shoot or project, you could say?
In 2019, in the fall of 2019, I shot a movie called Psycho Escort. It's on the Lifetime channel.
Is that the one where your husband's like, or no, it's like a boyfriend, and then he's crazy?
That's another. That's called Hidden in Plain Sight, which is on Netflix.
Oh, okay.
They're all very similar. Well, Psycho Escort. There is a.
You had a son, right?
Yes.
Yes, you had a son, and he picked your son up, and you were like, you told the kid, you were like, don't ever get in the car.
No, that is Psycho Escort.
Oh,
yeah.
so it is, all right.
God, yeah, both movies. I have a son. They both have a crazy, boyfriend. I mean, both of those, both very similar. Yes, that one was Psycho Escort. So I shot that one, and then I shot, it's called A Mother Knows Worse, which is also on the Lifetime channel. So those two I shot back to back in the fall of 2019. Then I went home for the holidays, stayed for a bit at the beginning of 2020 to be with my mom, and then went back to LA, and then COVID hit. And I mean, productions were down, like I can probably count how many auditions I had last year. There were so few, maybe like 10 to 15 over the course of the entire year, which is for me, that's not a lot. Productions just weren't happening. Some productions were, but on the whole, productions were just not happening. So
it's weird because California's, not to go into COVID and whatnot, speculation, but California's been a little too much.
Yeah, LA. I mean, over
Like, they
this
locked
last holiday, their numbers were through the roof. That is very surprising to me because in Los Angeles, I mean, first of all the restaurants are closed. They all got to the point where they closed outdoor dining in November. Outdoor dining was closed up until July, I think. Everyone, for the most part, I mean, you step outside of your apartment, you wear a mask, period. It's not even, if I go to a public place. It's like, no, you put a mask on as soon as you leave the house. So I'm not quite sure how that spike happened. Maybe it was just a lot of, it might have been like a lot of parties, or I just don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea what happened in Los Angeles. It was kind of bizarre. I mean, New York, when they had their spike, it really makes sense because New York, it's like people are living on top of each other.
Literally.
It's like it's just such a dirty city. Everything you touch something, and it's like how many other people have touched this one, surface today. So
that's how I feel when I ride a bird in Atlanta.
Yes. Oh.
You're like, how many people touch this scooter?
Yeah. So New York makes sense, but I don't get LA. I don't know what happened there. So. I don't know.
Yeah. Screw LA, right? All right. So I know right now you're working on a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
yes.
If I'm not mistaken, it's not like it's not an autobiography.
No,
it has nothing to do with you.
It's not that not necessarily. It's based on my time working at the Gramercy Park Hotel in New York City, in 2007 to 2010. So it's based on my experiences there. However, it is a fiction novel, and the main character, it's from a first-person point of view. It's loosely based on my experiences, but the character that I developed has her own, battles and issues and struggles that she's dealing with. Some of the other characters, a few of them are based on actual people. Some of them are just fictional. And then same thing with, a lot of the story has to do with the clientele that came to the hotel, which, as I mentioned before, there were a lot of, very famous people. Most of them are based on actual characters and actual people that came through that hotel, and some of them, a couple, are just fictional. So that's what that novel is about.
When you were working at the hotel and you were meeting all these high-profile people,
mm-hmm.
did it kind of start to make you feel like these people aren't as high profile as you think? Because it's easy to get caught up in the facade of media, but then when you meet people, like they say, you don't want to meet your heroes because, you're not disappointed, but then you're just like, oh, like this is my hero. Did you feel that way when you were meeting A-list actors? And like you said, that guy was messing up a lot of lines where you're almost like, wait a minute, like I'm just as good as these people.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other interesting thing, and part of the reason I'm writing this novel, is because the hotel was owned by someone named Ian Schrager, who actually founded Studio 54 back in the day. He ended up going to jail for money laundering. I don't know if you know this. And then he was really young.
Right.
His story is amazing. He's also an amazing person.
So who is he laundering money for?
Himself. I mean,
what was he doing to make the money?
He was tax evasion.
Oh, okay.
And had money, cash, bags of cash in the ceiling. I mean, there's actually a documentary about it right now. It's called Studio 54. It just came out a year or two ago. It's fascinating. You should check it out. It's his story. And it's also one of the first times that he has talked publicly about it. So it's really fascinating. But he has since moved on to hotels and has become a hotelier. And with the Gramercy Park Hotel, his philosophy, I mean, first of all, I went through, 3 different interviews to be hired on as a cocktail waitress.
Oh, just as a cocktail waitress?
Yes.
3 interviews?
Yeah, because it was part of his whole philosophy. He wanted a certain look for his staff. He wanted a certain personality. He wanted a certain educational background. There were very specific things that he was looking for in his staff. And the reason why is because his clientele were so high profile. So his philosophy, his hospitality philosophy, is that the clientele are not simply, they're not just customers. You know what I mean? They're guests. They're not just guests. They're your friends. Do you know what I mean? You treat them like family. You treat them as if they have walked into your home. So the idea was he didn't want this barrier to be between the staff and the clientele. He wanted everyone to feel like family. So the relationships that ended up, flowering, for use of a better word, or really just developing between the staff and these really high profile clientele, it was fascinating. I mean, I watched it happen for 3 years. None of the staff members, no one left because the money was too good. The experience was it was just wild. It was crazy. But yes, to answer your question, meeting some of these high profile people, I mean, that was the idea. Like, you become friends with them. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, at the end of the day, they're all just people. They're all just people like you and me, you know?
So you become friends with them. You're working this job. You're gaining these experiences, and now you're turning them into a book. So
correct. Yes.
Without giving too much away, behind the scenes sneak peek, what are some of the things we can hope to see in the novel? Like, was there a highlight moment? Was there ever like a, did you ever get invited to after parties? Like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, see, this is this kind of stuff.
Yes, yeah.
This is what we live for.
Yeah. Getting invited to, I was invited to go party with the Stones in their room, the Rolling Stones, that is. One night, it was like 5 o'clock in the morning. The promoter invited me up there. I actually didn't go because I was exhausted and it was 5 a.m. And I remember thinking, I need to go if for nothing else, but just, I need this material. Do you know what I mean? But I was just too tired. And to be honest, I mean, I could guess, what was going to happen up there.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were lots of parties in the Hamptons. There were, obviously, the staff members would date some of these, very famous people. And these stories are all in my novel. So it does give you an inside look into, this celebrity lifestyle from, sort of a normal person's point of view.
So do you think a lot of it's like misconstrued? Like,
a lot of what?
Like what a lot of people think is going on? Because it's easy to build something up in your head, right? Like,
sure, yeah.
Like, I mean, I feel that way about like buying a car.
Yeah.
Like, you want it, and then you get it, and you're like, yeah, well.
Yeah,
it's
for
the same
sure.
thing as having another car. You're just getting from point A to point B.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. There is, a lot of excitement and a lot of novelty, when you're going to hang out with like, some big, I so badly want to drop names, but I'm not going to. And I don't drop the names in my book either, just so you know. These are all like fictional, but, there could be potentially a guessing game for our audience or readers who read it. They might be able to figure out who's who. There is a bit of that in there. But, it's very exciting when you're going to go meet up with some big A-lister to go have drinks. Do you know what I mean? Or you're going to go like to their party, or you're going to go to their house or whatever. It is very exciting at the time. But in the same breath, yeah, you're right. I mean, you get there and, sometimes it is disappointing,
Same thing,
Yeah. And especially, celebrity lifestyle is, I think, I'm not a celebrity, so I can't speak to it, personally, but it seems to me that when you live a life where everything comes to you so easily, that, life kind of loses its glimmer after a while because, what is there to get excited about anymore? Do you know what I mean? Like, you can go to the hottest parties, you can like have the best food, the best drinks, you can, you have all the money in the world, like you can, date the hottest person, like everything is at your fingertips. So then after a while, it's like, well, what's there to look forward to? Do you know what I mean? Like what's actually exciting?
Yeah.
So in my experience, sometimes hanging out with some of these people, there was this feeling of, that they were sort of like chasing this dragon. Do you know what I mean? Like,
where does it go from here?
Where does it go? I mean, it seemed, their lifestyle just seemed sort of superfluous. And not everyone, of course. Do you know what I mean? But some of the experiences I had, of course, it was just like, how much can you drink? How many drugs can you do? How many people can you sleep with? Do you know what I mean? It's just like, how many before? It's just like, what's the point? Like, is this even worth it anymore? Is this life? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, am I even enjoying this?
What's the meaning? Yes, exactly.
Or am I just known for doing this? So I feel like I got to live up to You know how there's those people that are like, oh,
Yeah.
that guy always chugs a bottle every night, and then
Yeah.
it's like, I don't even want to drink anymore. But or that dude he's always gonna bring the weed, and then you're like, yo, you don't have it, and it's like, I was being nice. I was just being nice.
Yeah.
Like people start to know you for something, and it's almost like you take on that identity.
Yeah.
Or not that identity, but it's kind of like you take on that role, and then it kind of gets old.
Yeah, I think it just gets old. I think that's, I think it just becomes so second nature. Do you know what I mean? But at the same time, it's the only lifestyle that they know. It seems to me. I don't know. Again, I am not a celebrity. I can't speak for them. But from my experience, just observing them and, hanging out with some of them, it seemed that there is this sort of sadness of just like chasing. It just seemed like they were chasing all the time. Do you know what I mean? Chasing what? I'm not sure, chasing something to make them happy, maybe. You know what I mean? Seemed like...
like you never want to actually make it. Like it's almost like you don't want to get there. Like I mean, everyone wants to make it. Don't get me wrong.
No, I know what you're saying, but like you said, like never meet your heroes. Do you know what I mean? Like you begin to wonder, like what, hopefully you're not going after what you're going after for the fame, because I can tell you, and many celebrities have said this in various interviews, that the fame, once you get there, you're going to wish that you were just a normal person. Do you know what I mean? Like it might be, super dazzling at first, but then that wears off super quickly. And then, you start having other issues,
Get paranoid.
other problems.
Yeah, I would just be paranoid. Like there are people like trying to take pictures of me everywhere.
Sure, of course.
And you're just, like what if we were sitting here right now? I mean, here's the thing. I do see where early on you're like, oh my God, like people care about me.
Yeah. It's
But then
so
you're
exciting.
like, oh, you're like, people care about me.
After a while, I mean, you can't leave your house without, being I mean, I agree. Yeah, I don't think I would like that lifestyle either. Not for the fame of it. Do you know what I mean? Every move you make is being watched, is being written about. Again, to each their own. Some people might get really excited by that, and and for them, hopefully they make it to that point and can really have a lot of fun. But I think, there are definitely, everything has its pros and cons. Do you know what I mean? There are definitely some demons of fame, I think. Okay. I think that's sort of well known. Do you know what I mean? The dark side of fame. Do you know what I mean?
The dark side of well, the thing is, it's the type of thing you expect, but then you're like, I'll worry about that when I get there.
Sure.
And then you get there, and then you're like, geez, like, what's the point of my life?
Yeah.
Like,
I think a lot of famous people go through that,
Yeah.
I imagine,
Right. So, well, you've had a really interesting career, and I mean, you're obviously not done. But for someone who's listening right now, who kind of wants to get into the same thing, it's obviously a lot different. But considering, you've been in it for a minute. What is it? Like 20 years now?
Probably like
15.
13, something 13? Like that. Yeah.
What would you say? Like, what kind of advice would you give a person who's trying to get involved? Like, is it worth it? Is it kind of like,
I mean,
teach their own? Like, do you kind of just find your own thing that you were looking for, or like you said, do you just kind of always feel like you're chasing something that you never really get to, or is it just like, screw it, I'm here, I might as well?
I mean, to someone who's just starting and they really want to get into it, I would say it can be a hard, long road. It can also be a very short, successful, bright road, especially with something like acting where, the truth is you're either right for the role or you're not. Do you know what I mean? At a certain point, from a producer and a casting director's point of view, they're just looking for the right person for the role, period. So like you said, some people just have it. Do you know what I mean? Some people just have... And it might not even be talent. It's just the quality. It's just what they're looking for at that moment in time. Do you know what I mean? So it can happen very spontaneously. Someone can be at it for a very long time, and then they get their big break after 20 years, 30 years. Some people, they just get into it, and then they get lucky right off the bat. Just like anything else, it can be a long, hard road. There can be a lot of sacrifices made along the way. If you're a struggling actor, you're not going to be making a lot of money You'll watch your friends, start, getting successful in whatever they're pursuing, buying houses and, having savings and having these like kind of cushy lives for themselves. And you might not be on the same page. At some point or another, it's up to you. You have to look inside and figure out if that's something that you want to continue doing or not. And for everyone, that's totally different. Do you know what I mean? But for someone just starting out, it really is, it's like you're chasing your dream. So I guess it depends on how hard you want to chase it. But if you really believe in yourself and it's really something you want to do, then just keep going after it,
Yeah. Well, at least you can say that with experience. At least
Yeah.
you were successful. It's like for every you, how many people would you say there are that don't make it? Probably like a couple thousand.
Yeah. In fact, my fiance and I were talking about this recently. The percentage, I think we were listening to a podcast with Rob Lowe, and he was saying something like 99% of, God, what is the statistic? It's like only 1% of actors are represented by the union SAG, and only 1% of that 1% actually makes enough money to live.
That's crazy.
So, my fiance was like, you're the 1% of the 1%. Like, think about that. And again, it doesn't feel that way to me. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Oh my God. 1% of the 1%.
That's statistically what you're looking at.
Damn.
I do like to think about, there is a quote that Dave Chappelle said on one of his interviews where he was talking about wanting to make it as a comedian. And he was talking to his dad about it. And his dad was like, I don't know. Do you, how much do you love this? Like, do you really think you can make it? And he said, Dad, to me, it's like I can either be, a mailman and make like $30,000 a year, or I could be a comedian and make $30,000 a year. And to me, that's making it. And his father said, you keep that attitude, you'll be just fine. And I think that's a really important attitude to have, especially when you're entering into, any sort of artistic endeavor, acting especially. Like, don't get into it thinking you're going to be a huge celebrity. Get into it because you love it and because you think you can make a living doing it, period. If you can achieve that, then you've made it,
Yeah, especially the first one. Because, making a living, if you're doing it right, that kind of just follows with it.
Yeah.
But at first, don't get me wrong, there's just people podcasting, there's people making music, there's people doing everything just because they want to make money.
Right.
But it's like, I feel like when you're chasing a creative passion, you don't want to worry about the money.
Yeah.
You want to worry about the product. And
Of
if you have a
course.
good product, that'll obviously lead to something. Especially nowadays with the internet, you don't even need all the mediums. See, everybody in between, you can just cut right through.
Right. Yeah, you care about the product and you care about your own happiness. Do you know what I mean? Everyone's happiness comes from a different place. Everyone derives from a different place for every single human being. Some people really do care about money, and that's what they think brings them happiness. For me, I am happy with what I'm doing every single day has to make me happy. How I spend my time has to make me happy. So in that vein, I'm doing exactly that. So I'm happy. It's pretty cut and dry.
Well, when can we expect to see this book? When can we expect to?
Let's see. I'm finishing it up. I will be finishing up in the next month or two, but then I've got to send it out. It's got to be edited, and then, it's got to be shopped around, and a couple years probably, to be perfectly honest. Just when I think about how long it takes to publish a book, it'll probably be a couple years before it sees the light of day. But
Wow.
yeah.
Well, at least you're working on it now.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
yeah,
crazy. A
working
couple
on it,
years.
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't even know it took that long. Makes
Yeah,
sense,
I think
though.
it can. Especially if it's your first novel, you've got to make sure it's polished before you can even send it out. Hopefully you have an agent. You need an agent to help represent you and help send it out to different publishing houses and that sort of thing. And then once, you'll have a bunch of notes from the editor. You'll have a bunch of notes from your agent. You'll have a bunch of notes from the publishing. Once you sift through all of that, and then everyone agrees on a final draft that is publishable, then I think from what I understand, then it's a lot of like PR. There's some other stuff that happens before it's actually released. So
Probably
there's
do a
definitely
bunch of these, right?
yeah,
A lot of
yeah,
interviews.
exactly.
This is like the pre interview.
Right. Yeah, the pre interview.
Because I noticed that. I noticed a lot of people, you don't hear about them, and then when they got something coming out, it's like, oh, they're doing all the interviews, they're active on the
Yeah.
platforms. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah, you got to
Makes
do the
sense.
PR right before it comes out. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you can be Kanye. You can have a mental breakdown right before every album drops.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I
Pretty
mean,
smart.
that's actually, yeah, exactly. Any
anything.
publicity is good publicity.
Right, he's doing it best.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, believe it or not, we've been going for a little over an hour.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, time flies.
Yeah.
Man. I just want to go ahead and thank you so much for doing this, for coming
Yeah,
on.
thank you.
For anyone who's been watching and they've been enjoying it and they want to stay in touch with you, how can they stay in touch with you? If you just want to take a moment to shout out any platforms you have, any ways people can interact.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram. I guess you can contact me that way. Yeah, I'm gonna say Instagram's the easiest,
Just
best
Instagram?
way. Yeah, you can message me on Instagram. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Hey, once again, thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
Yeah, well, just like every other time, my name's Charbel Milan. Today we got,
Victoria Barabas.
and this has been A Time Shared. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Charbel.